An elite interspecies academy, located on a distant and neutral planet, welcomed students from all over the galaxy. The halls were filled with beings from countless worlds, each representing the pinnacle of their civilization's abilities. Some floated gracefully with telekinetic ease, others communicated in complex thoughts without speaking a word, and many were already masters of their species' unique psychic talents. In the midst of these alien students, a small group of humans quietly observed, out of place among the galaxy's most gifted minds. The humans, coming from Earth, a death world known for its hostile environment and resilient life, had earned a certain reputation. Physically robust, adaptable to extreme environments, and known for their sheer tenacity, they were often referred to as Deathworlders. Yet, in the eyes of the advanced alien species, humans were primitive, blunt instruments in a galaxy that prized mental and psychic prowess above all else. The Academy's alien faculty had little regard for their psychic potential. Humans might be strong, durable, and stubborn, but psychic abilities? That was for the more refined species. In this environment, a new curriculum was introduced. It was a bold, ambitious experiment designed to push the boundaries of psychic development across species. Led by the Lathrans, a highly evolved race of telepaths, the program aimed to unlock latent psychic powers in all students, regardless of their background. The Lathrans were certain that with the right guidance, even species who showed no outward psychic traits could be trained to awaken deeper abilities. But when it came to humans, they had low expectations. The consensus was that humans simply lacked the psychic refinement needed to tap into such power. From the human students' perspective, this skepticism was nothing new. They were used to being underestimated. Among themselves, they joked about the alien views of humans as brutish Deathworlders, but beneath the humor was a strong determination to prove their worth. For many of them, the Academy was their one shot to show the galaxy that humanity was more than just a collection of survivalists and warriors. They didn't need to be telepathic or telekinetic, but they wanted to belong, to be recognized as more than a primitive species that had simply gotten lucky by surviving a harsh planet. The start of the experiment was nothing out of the ordinary. Alien students immediately began demonstrating minor feats of telepathy, light telekinesis, and subtle mind-linking abilities. Their talents were obvious, almost second nature. For them, this was a mere refinement of skills they had already mastered. Meanwhile, the human students struggled. Days passed with little to no signs of progress from the humans. Their instructors watched with thinly veiled impatience, expecting failure. The human students felt the weight of expectation, and the absence of it. Tension began to build as the experiment progressed. While the alien students flourished, the human students grew more frustrated, feeling the pressure of their perceived inferiority. Despite their best efforts, nothing seemed to break through. But deep within them, something was stirring, waiting to be unlocked. What no one, not even the humans themselves, knew was that their species had developed natural defenses over millennia of evolution, living on a planet that constantly threatened their survival. These defenses made them resistant to psychic influence from others, something that had long been mistaken for a lack of potential. Then, the breakthrough came. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. During a routine session meant to stimulate latent telepathic abilities, one human student suddenly felt a presence in their mind that hadn't been there before. It wasn't like the practiced telepathy of the Lathrans or the precision of the other alien students. It was raw, unrefined, but undeniably there. A flicker of thought passed between them and the instructor, who froze, momentarily startled. The humans had shown the first signs of psychic awakening. Word spread quickly through the academy. The humans had always been counted out, their potential dismissed, but now something was happening, something unexpected. The alien faculty, once dismissive, were now cautiously intrigued. They had assumed humans lacked the capacity for such powers, but this small breakthrough hinted at the possibility that they had been wrong all along. What if humanity's psychic abilities had simply been locked away, shielded by the same evolutionary defenses that allowed them to survive the brutal conditions of Earth? As the experiment continued, it became clear that this was no anomaly. Other human students began experiencing similar awakenings. Some could read fleeting thoughts, others could move small objects with a mere flicker of concentration. It was chaotic, uncontrolled, and nowhere near the polished abilities of the alien students, but it was real. The humans were changing, evolving in ways no one had predicted. The alien students, once confident in their superiority, began to watch the humans more closely. What had been mere curiosity soon turned into something more serious. The humans, though still far from mastering their abilities, had unlocked something far deeper, something raw and powerful. The Academy had intended to reveal latent psychic talents, but what they had unleashed in the humans was far more than anyone had bargained for. The experiment had begun with the aim of leveling the playing field, giving every species a chance to develop their psychic potential. But as the human students started tapping into powers they barely understood, the balance of power within the Academy, and perhaps the galaxy, was starting to shift. The first stirrings of what it meant to be a Deathworlder were just beginning to surface, and no one, not even the humans themselves, knew how far it would go. The experiment proceeded as anticipated, with alien students effortlessly tapping into their inherent abilities. The telepaths linked minds with ease, communicating silently across the room. Telekinetics casually lifted small objects, floating them between each other with a flick of thought. For them, this was second nature, a comfortable exercise in refining skills they'd mastered long ago. Meanwhile, the human students were quiet. Despite their best efforts, there were no visible signs of progress. They struggled in silence, frustration building as they watched their peers display talents they couldn't even begin to grasp. For the alien instructors, it only confirmed what they had always believed: humans were psychically inert. Just as they had suspected, the Deathworlders weren't suited for this. But something was brewing beneath the surface. The human students may not have been consciously aware of it, but their struggles were pushing them closer to a breakthrough. The barriers that had held their psychic abilities dormant for so long were beginning to crack, and it was only a matter of time before something gave way. It happened during a training session, a routine exercise meant to stimulate telepathic communication. One human, who had been growing increasingly frustrated with their lack of progress, felt an overwhelming surge of emotion: anger, disappointment, a burning desire to prove everyone wrong. In that heated moment, something clicked. Without warning, a wave of thought passed between the human and the instructor. The instructor froze, their usually calm demeanor shattered as they felt the unmistakable touch of another mind. It wasn't the refined telepathy they were used to, it was raw, unfiltered, but undeniably present. The room went silent. For a brief moment, no one knew what to say. The instructor, visibly stunned, quickly recovered and dismissed it as a fluke, an anomaly. But the human student knew something had changed. It wasn't just in their mind, it was real, tangible. They had done it. The psychic barrier that had seemed insurmountable was now broken. Word spread quickly. The faculty, once dismissive, began to take notice, though many remained skeptical. A single instance could be a mistake, a random occurrence with no real significance. But it didn't stop there. Over the following days, more human students began to experience similar awakenings. During moments of stress or heightened emotion, their powers would surge to the surface, sometimes telepathy, sometimes telekinesis, or even brief flashes of precognition. The changes were subtle at first, barely noticeable to anyone not paying close attention. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. The alien instructors were caught off guard. They had spent years studying psychic abilities, confident in their knowledge of which species were capable of such feats, and which were not. Humans had never been considered contenders. Yet here they were, demonstrating abilities that should have taken years to develop, if at all. The suddenness and intensity of these awakenings left the faculty scrambling for explanations. Perhaps it was a coincidence, they thought. Perhaps it was the result of the unique conditions of the experiment. Whatever the cause, they couldn't deny that something was happening. The other alien students were not so forgiving. For as long as they had been at the Academy, humans had been the underdogs, the ones who were physically resilient but psychically inferior. Now, with these new powers manifesting, the balance was beginning to shift. Fear crept in. What if the humans were capable of more than anyone had anticipated? What if, once fully awakened, they surpassed even the most advanced species in psychic potential? Tension grew. The once clear hierarchy, with the advanced psychic races at the top and the humans at the bottom, was being upended. No longer were the humans just brute survivors from a death world. They were now a wild card, and no one could predict what they would become. As more human students unlocked their powers, the variety and intensity of their abilities became apparent. Some developed telekinesis, moving objects with little more than a glance. Others began to read thoughts, though often in bursts of uncontrolled telepathy that left them reeling. Still others showed signs of precognition, catching glimpses of events seconds before they happened. The powers were raw, unrefined, and often difficult to control, but they were undeniably there. For the alien students, this was deeply unsettling. The humans had always been an afterthought, a species known more for their physical endurance than for any real intellectual or psychic capabilities. Now they were something else entirely, something unpredictable, perhaps even dangerous. Whispers spread through the academy. Some alien students distanced themselves from the humans, fearful of what they were becoming. Others, curious and perhaps sensing the shift in power, attempted to align themselves with their once dismissed classmates. But no matter how they responded, one thing was clear: the humans were no longer the weak, inferior species everyone had assumed them to be. Their latent powers, long dormant and hidden behind their natural defenses, were awakening. And as they did, the entire academy, and possibly the galaxy, was forced to confront a new reality. The human students, too, were beginning to realize the significance of what was happening. They had come to the academy with low expectations, hoping merely to keep up with their alien peers. Now they were on the verge of something far greater. The abilities they were developing were powerful, yes, but they were also unpredictable, and with that unpredictability came a sense of danger. What would happen if they lost control? What if their newfound powers pushed them beyond what they could handle? But even as those questions loomed, there was something else, something deeper. For the first time, the humans could see the potential within themselves. They were no longer just Deathworlders, scraping by on grit and determination. They were evolving, becoming something more than anyone, least of all the aliens, had imagined. The experiment had unlocked a door, and there was no turning back. The first weeks after the humans' powers began to surface were chaotic. What had initially been seen as a breakthrough quickly turned into a nightmare of unpredictability. The human students, who had spent their lives in a world where psychic abilities were unheard of, struggled to contain the raw force now coursing through them. At first, they tried to follow the same protocols as their alien counterparts: meditation, focus exercises, controlled experiments, but nothing seemed to work. Their powers fluctuated wildly, with no warning or clear trigger. One moment, a human student might successfully lift a small object with telekinesis, only for that object to fly across the room uncontrollably the next. Another student would tap into telepathy, catching stray thoughts from nearby aliens, only to be overwhelmed by a flood of voices they couldn't block out. The unpredictability wasn't just frustrating, it was dangerous. A single lapse in concentration could cause accidents, and it wasn't long before the school began to feel the impact. The atmosphere within the academy grew tense. Minor incidents turned into major ones as humans unintentionally caused chaos. During a training session, a student's telekinetic ability spiraled out of control, resulting in a massive piece of equipment being hurled across the room. Though no one was injured, the fear was palpable. On another occasion, a human student attempting to control their telepathic abilities accidentally connected with several minds at once, triggering a psychic feedback loop that left both them and the alien students involved temporarily incapacitated. These events weren't malicious. The human students were just as frightened as everyone else. They had never asked for these abilities, and now they were being forced to master powers they didn't understand. Each incident only amplified the fear among the humans themselves. Some began to question whether they could, or even should, continue with the experiment. What if they couldn't control their powers? What if they hurt someone? Among the humans there was a divide. Some felt a rush of empowerment, thrilled by the idea that they were now among the most powerful beings in the Academy, perhaps even in the galaxy. They had gone from being underestimated and dismissed to holding abilities that even the most advanced alien species couldn't ignore. For these students, the struggle for control was worth it. They saw their powers as a gift, something that would elevate humanity's status in the galaxy and allow them to finally stand as equals, or even superiors, among other species. But others were less enthusiastic. For them, the powers were a burden, a responsibility they weren't sure they wanted. They feared the potential destruction they could cause and questioned whether humanity was ready to wield such power. What if these abilities were just too dangerous? What if they couldn't be controlled? And even more worrying, what if others, both human and alien, sought to exploit these powers for their own ends? The alien students were no less conflicted. The Academy, once a place of peaceful cooperation and learning, was starting to fracture under the strain. Some alien races, especially those with a history of psychic dominance, viewed the human awakening with growing alarm. They had always considered themselves at the top of the psychic hierarchy, but now they were faced with a species whose raw potential seemed to exceed their own. These students whispered in corners, devising ways to suppress the human abilities before they spiraled further out of control. There were even rumors of covert sabotage, alien students intentionally disrupting human training sessions, trying to trigger psychic overloads in the hopes that the humans would be deemed too dangerous to continue the experiment. On the other side, some alien students began to view the humans with a newfound respect. Where before they had seen only physical endurance and adaptability, now they saw potential that, if harnessed properly, could change the balance of power in the galaxy. These students reached out to the humans, offering assistance, guidance, and friendship. They foresaw that aligning themselves with humanity could be an advantage as the humans' influence grew. After all, if humans could unlock their full psychic potential, they would undoubtedly become key players on the galactic stage. Tensions mounted as these opposing views collided. The Academy, once a symbol of interspecies unity, now simmered with fear, envy, and mistrust. The human students, caught between their struggles to control their abilities and the varying reactions of their alien peers, found themselves increasingly isolated. The experiment, which had started as an opportunity to unlock psychic potential, had inadvertently revealed something much deeper: humanity's capacity to disrupt the established order. It all came to a head during a high-level training session. A human student, who had been making significant progress with telekinesis, was attempting a difficult exercise under the watchful eyes of both human and alien faculty. The goal was simple: move a large object from one side of the room to the other, an exercise that alien students routinely performed with ease. But something went wrong. The student, perhaps nervous or overconfident, lost focus at a critical moment. Instead of gently guiding the object, their power surged uncontrollably. The object shot across the room with terrifying speed, smashing into the wall and shattering into pieces. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the room, both literally and figuratively. In that moment, everyone realized just how dangerous the situation had become. If the human students couldn't control their abilities, they posed a serious risk, not just to themselves, but to everyone around them. The near-catastrophic event forced both the humans and the aliens to confront the reality of the situation. For the human students, it was a harsh wake-up call. They were no longer just participants in an experiment. They were wielding powers that could potentially reshape the galaxy. But with that power came enormous responsibility, and they had yet to prove they could handle it. For the alien faculty and students, it was a sobering reminder that the galaxy was changing in ways they hadn't anticipated. The humans, once seen as inferior, were now at the center of a growing storm. The question was no longer whether they could unlock their potential. It was whether anyone, human or alien, could stop what was coming. In the aftermath of the incident, the Academy was plunged into deep deliberation. The once promising experiment had revealed far more than anyone had anticipated, and now the consequences of that revelation had to be addressed. The destruction caused by the human students' power surge had shaken the school to its core. What had been a hopeful, if cautious, attempt to unlock psychic abilities had instead opened a door to something far more unpredictable. The faculty, once confident in their ability to control the experiment, were now faced with a serious question: should they continue? For the human students, the incident was a turning point. They had come to the academy as outsiders, expected to fail or at best struggle to keep pace with their alien peers. Now they were the focus of attention, but not in the way anyone had expected. The powers they had awakened were immense, but also dangerous. Some humans began to reconsider their place at the academy. Was it worth continuing down this path, knowing the risks? Could they trust themselves with the kind of power they were beginning to wield? These were no longer hypothetical questions. They had seen firsthand the destruction they could cause, and it terrified them. But not all were afraid. Among the human students, a growing sense of pride began to take root. They had proven themselves in a way no one thought possible. Their abilities, though volatile, were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species had refined their psychic powers over millennia, humans were just starting to tap into theirs, and yet they were already on par with the most advanced psychic races. This wasn't just an accident or a fluke of the experiment. This was something fundamental to their nature as Deathworlders. As word of the incident spread, the attitudes of the faculty and alien students shifted dramatically. The humans were no longer dismissed as weak or insignificant. Fear mingled with respect. The realization dawned on everyone: humans, once seen as brutes capable of surviving in harsh environments, were in fact something far more complex. Their natural resilience, forged in the deadly conditions of Earth, had made them resistant to psychic influence. That resistance had masked their true potential for generations. The experiment had simply bypassed their mental defenses, unleashing powers that had always been there, dormant and waiting. For some of the alien faculty, this revelation was deeply unsettling. They had always considered themselves the gatekeepers of psychic power, the most advanced and enlightened species in the galaxy. Now, they were faced with the reality that a species they had long underestimated had the potential to surpass them. For others, it was a moment of begrudging admiration. The humans had accomplished something extraordinary, and they couldn't be ignored anymore. The alien students, too, had to reevaluate their position. Those who had previously looked down on the humans now saw them in a new light. The growing rift between species widened as fear began to replace the once casual indifference. Some alien students distanced themselves further, wary of what the humans might become. Others, sensing the winds of change, sought to align themselves with the humans, hoping to gain favor with a species that was quickly becoming a force to be reckoned with. For the human students, this newfound power came with a burden. They had always been Deathworlders, survivors, warriors, a species that thrived in environments others found inhospitable. But now, they were more than that. They were psychics, capable of mind-reading, telekinesis, and perhaps even more abilities yet to be discovered. This was a power that could elevate humanity to a new place in the galaxy, but it was also a power that could destroy them if they weren't careful. Some humans embraced this power fully, eager to see how far they could push their abilities. They argued that humanity had always been destined for greatness, and this was just the next step in their evolution. Others were more cautious. They worried that these abilities, if left unchecked, could lead to conflict, both within the Academy and across the galaxy. What if humanity couldn't control its powers? What if, in their pursuit of strength, they lost sight of the very qualities that made them human? There was also the matter of responsibility. With great power came great consequences. The humans knew that their actions moving forward would be scrutinized by the entire galaxy. If they used their abilities recklessly, they risked becoming a threat, not just to the Academy, but to the delicate balance of interspecies relations across the stars. But if they learned to control their powers, if they mastered their new abilities, they could become leaders, perhaps even protectors, of a galaxy that was constantly on the brink of chaos. As the days passed, the humans began to train harder than ever, pushing their limits, but with a new sense of purpose. They understood that they were no longer just students at an elite academy. They were pioneers of a new era for humanity. Their powers, once seen as a liability, were now a symbol of their potential. But they also knew that they were walking a fine line. Too much power, unchecked, could lead to destruction. Too little, and they would forever be seen as a threat. It was a delicate balance, one they would have to navigate carefully. The faculty, after much deliberation, decided to allow the experiment to continue, but with strict oversight. They knew that what had been unleashed couldn't be put back in the box, but they also recognized that humanity's awakening was just the beginning. The powers the human students had displayed were only a glimpse of what they might one day become. As the humans continued their training, a sense of inevitability settled over the academy. The galaxy would soon have to reckon with the full extent of what Deathworlders were capable of. No longer were humans just the survivors of a dangerous world, they were becoming something more, something that could shift the balance of power in ways no one had anticipated. The story of humanity's awakening was far from over. Their psychic abilities were still growing, evolving with each passing day. And as they learned to harness their powers, they were preparing for a future in which they would no longer be seen as underdogs. The galaxy, once dismissive of Earth's inhabitants, would soon face a new reality. The Deathworlders were rising, and nothing would ever be the same again.